We're going to go ahead and get started, so if everyone can just grab your food and take a seat real quick, we'll go ahead and start our presentation. So my name is Eddie Bodkin, and I've been investing for the past 8 years, and I started out 8 years ago doing short sales and wholesaling. Then a couple years after that, I started doing rehabbing. Now I also work as a real estate agent. I work with Grace, and we do a lot of work with investors and commercial properties. So the goal of our presentation here is we're going to talk about how to evaluate residential and commercial investment properties. Now, most of what we're going to talk about is it assumes you have some knowledge of real estate investing. If you don't, that's okay, because we're going to provide a video. We'll have a link to that and send it out to everybody. So just make sure we have your email and your contact information if we don't. But you'll be able to review what we're talking about and go back over anything that you missed. So really the key to what we're talking about today is the way to do this efficiently is to have the right systems and tools. And so we're going to talk about and show you guys some of the systems and tools that we use to analyze our properties and also what we use to help our clients. So we're going to start with looking at examples of residential rehabs and rentals, and then Grace is going to talk about commercial. So Grace, if you want to say something.
Hey everyone, I'm Grace Frank, and I've been investing in real estate for about 25 years. We've pretty much started to switch from residential over to commercial. We're getting into self-storage. That's kind of where we're at in our life, is we've decided to go into some multifamily, new construction, and self-storage. So we've been taking the last 5 years and getting out of our residential property. I've done a lot of flips in the past, but we do a lot of new construction, and investing is my passion, and it's how I got into real estate to begin with. And when we moved here about 13 years ago, I decided to get out of corporate America and only do real estate full time. So I haven't missed corporate America. I love what I do, and real estate investing is pretty much what I believe is how most of Americans became wealthy. If you look at most of the wealthy top 10 people, they've gotten a lot of that wealth through real estate. So real estate is a great investment opportunity. I know that if I'm looking at a piece of property, I can understand what's going on with it. When I look at a corporation, I don't know what's going on with it. So for me, I've always felt more comfortable investing my resources in what I can see, touch, and I can have a responsibility in changing, versus a corporate company that I don't understand what they're going to do, how they're going to change to, how they're going to react to the market. So I'm going to talk about investment property, but commercial. But this is kind of an overview for you guys to have some notes. And if you have questions, we'll certainly answer those. But when I'm thinking about investment property, these are the topics that always come up to me. How do I determine the value of my rental property? That's always the biggest question, is how do you do that? And we're going to show you some software that we use to help us evaluate that. Why is real estate evaluation important? Well, I learned from my grandfather from a very young age. There's only one time you make your money: when you buy. The only time you make your money is when you buy. If you buy right, you can sell well. But how you buy is crucial in real estate. What determines the value of your investment property? There are a lot of different things that go into value. And what we're starting to see right now, what is one of the biggest things right now that is changing the value of property? One key factor. Unless you're paying cash, interest rates, okay? Interest rates can make a tremendous change in the value of a real estate property. So we're going through a lot of interesting times right now with interest rates. I've seen commercial go from 4 to 5.5 in the last 6 months. So it's really, really important. And right now, where we're at with interest rates really can change the dynamics of a property's value. What affects real estate prices? Well, a lot of things affect real estate prices, but most people, unless you're paying cash, interest rate is going to be one of the biggest ones, and we'll go through a lot of other things today too. So we're going to start with Eddie. Eddie's going to go through the commercial, show you the software that he uses on the commercial side, and then I'm going to go through, the residential, and then I'm going to go through the commercial side. And the software that I use is called iAnalyzer, and it's great because it works for commercial properties as well as multifamily, and gives you a lot of flexibility to actually, and we'll go through that, do price evaluations. So, Eddie.
All right. So, what we're going to look at here is how to evaluate a residential rehab. Okay, so this is a property. It is currently on the market. You can go look at it if you want. I walked through it a couple months ago. I actually used it for a property tour that I did here for some investors that we had in town. So I'm going to go through the steps of how to evaluate repairs and how to determine your offer price and how to look at your return on investment. So now obviously, there's going to be other steps to this or before you get to this point, like for example, your marketing or pre-qualifying the seller or maybe talking to the agent if the property is listed. So I'm not going to go over all that because there's even more involved in that. So I'm just going to start just at the point to where you decide, hey, you've done a little bit of pre-qualification on this property and you've decided that it's something that you want to pursue and you want to make an offer on. So we're going to look at how to evaluate the ARV, how to estimate repairs, and then how to determine what to offer and what you're going to make on this particular property. So what I'm going to do is go through some pictures, then I'm going to go through some comps, then we're going to go through some of the calculations on how all that works. Well, it's not pulling up. Huh. Hang on. Well, for some reason my pictures aren't pulling up here.
You see them individually.
Oh, is it showing?
All of them.
Oh, yeah.
Little ones.
Yeah, but it's not. Hang on. Okay, we'll just go to a different part here. So I'll just click on some of these pictures here and we can take a look at it. So this property, just based on just looking at it from the outside, you can see that the windows, they're older windows. So I'm just going to assume that if we rehabbed it, we would replace that. So we're going to look at what to do on the outside, then what to do on the inside, and then bring it all together. Now, I've walked to this property, but I've not inspected it in extreme detail. So there may be some things you still have to do, like if you wanted to go make an offer on it. What I'm saying here is not going to be conclusive to everything you would have to do, but it's going to be close. And essentially, that's what you want to do when you're looking at estimating repairs. You want it to be close, but it's not really exact. I mean, if you're within plus or minus $5,000 on your repair estimate, then you've done your job. Okay, so it's not exact, but it should be close. It should be close enough to where when you make the offer and get it accepted, you're going to make money. So let's just look at the outside of this property. So first of all, I'm not sure how well you can see it in the picture, but when I look at that house, the roof does not look like it's in bad shape. If you're renting this property out, you could probably keep it. However, just based on the color, like when you see it in real life, it's this really kind of ugly green color. So if I was rehabbing that and putting it back on the market, I just wouldn't want to have that color. So you could, replace the roof. You could put some shingles over it. The way I have it here on our repair estimate, I just considered just replacing the roof. And that's really the reason. So I would probably change that out, just really more for cosmetic reasons. The windows, they weren't in bad shape, but again, if you're going to sell it to a retail buyer and get full price, that would be a big plus to change out these windows. And then if you look just overall at the house, cosmetically, it's got this brick and other types of siding mixed together. I would just blend that all in with one color paint. I would paint the brick, just paint everything one color, and it would make it look more uniform and more complete. So basically, just from right here, I will just look at roof, windows, painting. The front door, if you notice, it has, it's just like some windows, and it's really more of like almost kind of a storm door more than a door. So I would probably replace that too. So this is the side view of the property. It does have a basement, and another thing on this is I'm not really considering what we're going to do with the basement because all the other comps are just one level. So I'm just going to focus on what would we do if we rehab that one level. And honestly, I really wouldn't do much to the basement anyway, because when you start building out basements, then you get into, it doesn't appraise for as much per square foot as the top level of your house. I mean, it's less than 50%. So you really get into a situation where if you start building out a lot in a basement, and there's not other comparables like that, you're probably not going to see much of a return, or at least on a lot of properties like this. So this is the back of the house. I don't think the HVAC was there. It's not in my picture, but from what I remember, it's not there. So I'm going to also consider replacing the HVAC. Now it does have ductwork, so we don't have to do that. But I'm going to definitely, see right here, there's no HVAC, so I'm pretty sure it's missing. So that's pretty much the outside. The other side of the house is the same. So really, we're going to do 16 windows. We're going to paint. We're going to do the roof. We're going to do just some miscellaneous stuff. I think there may have been like some miscellaneous gutter repair, but those are the big items. So inside of the house, this is when you walk in. So it's got, this is when you go in the front door and you look to the right. So it's got a living room, but then it's got kind of this strange little thing here where it's like an opening to a staircase. So I would actually just fill that in and make that complete. But then this other part right here that goes to the kitchen, I would open that up and just make that part of the kitchen. So this is a better view right here. So this wall right here, I would just open that up to blend it with the kitchen and then fill in the other wall next to the staircase. So what we're looking at here is it's got good hardwood floors, so we would sand and refinish that. We would do painting. Usually always replace the fixtures because it makes it look a lot better. The kitchen, you're going to just replace all of that. And you're going to have to arrange your kitchen a little bit differently because if that wall's not there, then you're going to have a different setup. But you're definitely going to replace cabinets, counters, appliances, replace the flooring, and just put a brand new kitchen in it. And again, the goal for this is we're rehabbing it to put it on the market to sell it for the top price, to get as much as we can and sell it to a retail buyer. If we were trying to rent this out, we wouldn't do as much, or we wouldn't do finishes that were as nice. It would still look good, but it wouldn't be as high quality finishes. So this other part, this is kind of like a filled-in garage. I really wouldn't do much to this other than doing some sheetrock repair and just put some inexpensive flooring. So here's one part where it's got, part of the sheetrock missing and some wiring and different things. So I would just fill that out, put new sheetrock in it, paint it, and then put some flooring down. This is the basement I was talking about, but there's really not a whole, I really wouldn't do much here. And again, I'm not going to even go into that just based on our presentation for today. So here's one of the bedrooms. Pretty simple. It's just a part of the painting and a part of the flooring and replacing fixtures. It's all a part of that particular repair. And then here's the two bathrooms. And if you notice, most people don't want Peptol Bismol pink anymore. So we would just replace that. We would just consider, just doing a new bathroom. So there's one there, and there's another one in the master bathroom. And then there's actually another one in that area where the garage was filled in. So we would look at doing 3 bathrooms. So I just wanted to give you an overview real quick of what it looked like, assuming that showed up okay on the projector. So now what I'm going to do is go through a repair estimator. So, I think this is really important to be able to use this because this is how you start systemizing your business and you're able to start doing more deals and to replicate what you're doing and also be more solid on your numbers. Some people, look, if you've been rehabbing houses for a long time and you're a contractor, you might be able to walk through and pretty much know what you're going to do on a property. But even then, it's still good to have a system to where you can just check everything off and know what you're doing and know what your repairs are going to be. So what we're going to look at now is what's called a repair estimator. And it's just simply a checklist for all of our repairs. Okay, so if you notice on this first cost right here, I checked off that we're just going to rip and replace the roof. So if you replace this roof at $4 a square foot and just over 1,600 square feet on that top part of the house, you'd pay about $6,400 for that. Now you could probably get it done a little bit less than that, but just for the sake of this example, if you paid $4 a square foot, then that's what the cost of replacing the roof would be. Now if you could maybe put a layer of shingles over it, if there was not another layer there, you could possibly do that for about a little over half the cost. So that would be another option there. And then maybe what I would do, considering that the condition of that roof was not terrible, but I just didn't like the way it looked cosmetically. So go down to the next step. We're still on the exterior. So what I did was I added a little bit of money here for power washing the finish. So usually we pressure wash the outside of the house before we paint. So I just put about $400 for that. That should be sufficient just to do a quick power wash on the outside. Okay, are you guys all good? I want to make sure that I'm not going too fast. Is everything good? We good? All right, cool. Okay, so the next step, I just added some money for painting the outside. So at $2 a square foot, based on a 1,600 square feet house, it would be about $3,200. And see, the other thing too, with this software that I use here, it calculates all that for me. So I don't have to go in and like figure out, anything other than the square footage of the house. And I plug that in, and then based on what I'm paying per square foot for the repair, or if it's a lump sum, it would be just one total cost for a certain repair. But most of this is automatically calculated based on what I'm paying my contractor for that repair. And the other thing you want to keep in mind with doing this type of, or using this type of system is, like for example, if you use this software, it'll have certain numbers that are in there by default, or maybe you get, a spreadsheet from another investor or from an education program you sign up to or whatever. But you always want to update that to fit your prices in your market, because it's going to fluctuate. And the prices here are based on like a national average, but I still update that based on what I'm doing here. So that's another important part to doing this, is just make sure it's congruent with what you're actually paying your contractors. And sometimes it may take going through a couple of rehabs before you kind of get to that sweet spot, but it's just another important part to keep in mind whenever you're estimating repairs. So the next thing we're going to is, so we're going to look at some more of the exterior repairs. So here's the windows. So we counted 16 windows, or I counted 16 windows before I did this. And at $250 a window, then that equals $4,000. And I've changed windows on stuff like that, and it's made a huge difference. I mean, even if the windows aren't in terrible shape, just changing that and then painting it can make it stand out just in a totally different way. So landscaping, I didn't really put much for that. There's a little bit to clean up in the yard, maybe just put some shrubs and some mulch, but I just put $500 for that. So usually I'm doing, like for Chattanooga properties, $500 to $1,000 on landscaping. So it's typically basic stuff, but it's just something to kind of add to the overall curb appeal of the property. Now I did add some repair costs to the deck, because when I went out and looked at it, you couldn't really see from the pictures because it had new spindles for whatever reason on the outside, but the actual decking needed some work. So I just put some repair costs in this to replace some of those boards and then to stain it. So that's what this reflects here. So I don't think it needs to be completely replaced, but I think there needs to be some work done there. Okay, so let's go into the interior. So I just kind of mentioned some of this as I was going through the pictures, but interior paint, kind of the same thing as what we did on the outside. You plug in the square footage and your cost per square foot, and it gives you your number. And then this is some of the flooring. So what I did was I figured, and this is not an exact number, and again, when you're doing this, it just needs to be close. It doesn't have to be exact, but I just put roughly $1,000 for refinishing the hardwoods. And that's, refinishing those hardwoods, you're gonna, you can do that for about the same price as carpet, but that's gonna give it a lot better value if you refinish the hardwoods, and a lot more buyers are gonna like that. So I always try to refinish hardwoods whenever that's already existing in houses like that. Then I put 475 square feet for laminate flooring. That was basically just to have some kind of covering in that room that was the filled-in garage. So just something inexpensive, but something to still put something down to where there's something on the floor. And then usually I'll do tile in the kitchens and bathrooms. And most of the time it's not expensive tile. It's the 59 cent a square foot stuff at Home Depot, or a little bit higher, but not much higher than that. Usually not more than $1 a square foot for the tile I use on most of the rehabs here that I do. So I figured about 100 square feet for the kitchen, and then 20 square feet for a backsplash, and then just roughly 50 square feet for just putting some tile in the bathrooms. Now this one item here, this actually makes it a lot easier when you're walking through a house and you can kind of group things together. So this is typically what I do with kitchens and bathrooms, because I know that, you know, for like $130,000 to $160,000 house in Chattanooga, I'm going to be spending $5,000 to $6,000 on cabinets and counters, and really kind of depending on what countertops I use. So I just go in and look at a kitchen, and that includes the $6,000 would include the cabinets, the countertops, and then pretty much kind of everything from the wall out, you know, so your faucets and your sink and everything that's attached. Then you want to include your appliances. So roughly, I usually spend about $2,000 on appliances for your typical rehab here. Where did that go? So I just put medium priced home appliances. Okay, and so the bathrooms, this is another place where everything's grouped together. So typically it costs about $2,500 to $3,000 per bathroom. So there's 3 bathrooms here, so I did 3 at $3,000 is $9,000. So that makes it quick and easy. Again, it's not really exact, but it is still close. I mean, it's going to be within that $2,500 to $3,000 range for a full bath. Then I also added some repairs here for opening up that wall. So I just added $1,500. I wasn't sure if it was load bearing, but if you're not really sure, just go ahead and add it. So it just has some extra cost there in case it's a load-bearing wall. And then just a couple miscellaneous things here. Patching some sheetrock. There's a couple places where that needed to be done, so I added $1,000 for that. This is the exterior door that I mentioned. Then I also added an HVAC. So I just added the unit at $4,000, but I didn't add any ductwork because it had that. And then I threw in a couple $1,000 to replace the fixtures. Now, you know, again, I just did a walkthrough on this house. There could be other repairs. There may be some plumbing stuff you have to do. There may be some extra electrical stuff. I'm not sure. Other than that one part where there were some wires hanging out, but that was pretty minimal. So I'm just replacing the fixtures just for the sake of our example. But again, if you go and look at this house, there may be, you know, more things that you would want to do. And then one of the last things here is just adding some costs for demo. And I think people probably skip over this, but I mean, usually you want to consider demoing a house like this. We'll take a couple of dumpsters. If you're going to replace 3 bathrooms and you're going to, you know, pull out some of the, you know, change up the wall and take out the cabinets and all of that, I mean, you want to figure a couple of dumpsters on that. So usually about $500 per dumpster on the rental, and then $500 each for the labor as well. So $2,000 for the demo costs. And then I usually also add a contingency, usually anywhere from 5 to maybe 15% of the total cost, and that's what this is here. So what I did was I added about 10% of the cost on top of my rehab costs, and that's kind of your fudge factor. That's in case, if you get into something and oops, I didn't see that, or I didn't know that was behind the wall, or the city's making me do something else. You know, it's good to have that in there to incorporate that into your repair costs, so that way it gives you a little bit of a buffer in case you miss something, you know. But now if you didn't, then it's just a little extra money you make. All right, so that's our repair estimate. So then what we do is we take all of that and we plug that into what's called our deal analyzer, okay? Are you guys good? Does this make sense? Okay, all right. Are we good? Okay. All right, and see, this is also what's good about this software, is that it calculates all of this for you. So we got the square footage of the house, we've got the after repair value. You know what, let me actually go over that real quick. I did not do the after repair value and the comps. So it's actually something you want to make sure, oh, here's the pictures now. That's something you want to make sure that you do before you calculate all these other costs. Because if your after repair value, meaning the value you're going to try to sell the property for, if that number's off, it's going to throw everything else off. So you want to make sure that that is a solid number. So the first step whenever I do an after repair value is I go and try to find as many comps as I can within a mile or less from that house that's as close to that house as I can find. Now, that's also another thing to keep in mind when you're rehabbing. The more properties that are similar to your property, the easier it is to come up with the repair value. If you're out in some rural area or an area where there's, a house that's not like everything else, it's going to be a lot more difficult to come up with the value. And if it's too much of that, it's probably not a good area to rehab. So just keep in mind, it'll make it a lot easier on the coming up with the repair value the closer your comps are to your subject property. So that's the first thing I do is I look at a mile or less out. I usually start at about half a mile. Like this property had like 12 comps. I mean, that's the reason I'm using it too, or one of the reasons, because it's in a great area. It's right in Red Bank where there's a lot of first-time home buyers. It's in a range where there's a lot of demand and there's a lot of activity. So coming up with the comparables and the after repair value is a lot easier to do. Okay, so that's the first thing I do is look at comps within a mile or less of the property, typically about 20% plus or minus the square footage, and that have sold within the last 6 months. Now, when you start going past 6 months, especially in this market, you're probably going to get into a situation where something has changed. So you want to try to stick with 6 months or less on the comps, and preferably in the same neighborhood. Now, this property is not really in a neighborhood, but there's still, you can tell when this stuff was built. I mean, this pretty much the same builder came and did almost the same stuff. Or the same, however many builders there were. So that's still going to be okay. But like if you're in an area where there's a specific neighborhood, it's best to pull comps from that neighborhood, because you could have an area where, there's a neighborhood right next to it and the values are a lot more or a lot less. So that's why, so our realtors here will appreciate this. That's why whenever your seller says, well, I looked on Zillow and it was worth X amount of dollars, and you're looking on the MLS and thinking, it's not even worth close to that. Well, that's why, because Zillow lumps everything together and it goes over those, those barriers like your neighborhoods or even, like zip codes and things like that, which could drastically change the value. So you just want to make sure that you get within the neighborhood or less than a mile from the property in most cases. All right, so I want to look at the comps that I pulled for this real quick, and that will explain how I came up with the after repair value. And I won't go over this in too much detail, but just to pretty much say that most of these comps are very similar. Now, I wonder why this is not pulling up. Okay, that's strange. I'm having computer issues, so I'll come back to that. So we'll just go back to the deal analyzer because the other part came up while I was waiting on it anyway. So we'll just go ahead and look at this. The after repair value, that's what I was talking about. So basically what I determined looking at the comps, kind of looking at an average price range of what the comparables sold for. So basically there was comparables anywhere from about $150,000 to about $165,000. There may be, I think there's like one property at like $170,000, but really you have a range of about $155,000 to $165,000, and that's really what you want to do is to narrow it down to the properties that are most similar, and then come up with a range, and then you just want to make sure you're selling your property within that range. If you want to get more specific than that, I mean, like, you can try to do adjustments, like if one house has a garage and maybe your subject house doesn't, maybe make an adjustment for that, meaning that you decrease the value of the property that has that extra characteristic to match your other property. But I try to avoid that because it's just easier to just narrow it down to a range and kind of look more at the average price per square foot, because like when you look at these comps, let's see if it came back up. That sudden came up. When you look at these comps, you'll see that you can't necessarily always determine exactly what caused the change in value. Like for example, you can have one property that maybe sold for 160 and it was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, but then one that sold for 165 and it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. So you can't really say that the extra, well, I mean, a small, having less bathrooms contributed to the price, because you could have one where, you know, it has maybe an extra feature that sells for less than one that, you know, has not as many features. So that's why I think not getting too caught up in all the details of the property will make it easier for you. Just make sure that you're within that range, and try to price your property to where it's not the highest. Like the highest comp here was 170, but I don't price it at 170. I'll run my numbers at like 165, and then, you know, when I list it, I'll try to do like 169. You know, try to get the extra amount when I first put it on the market. So I think that's just a good strategy to not overprice it right off the bat, because then if you do that, you know, then you're gonna have less buyers that look at it. Okay, still don't know what this is doing here. Okay, here it is. Let's see if I can pull it up this way. All right, so you notice here, like this is a map of the comps. So there was, what, 12 comps for this, which is great. And usually, I mean, even if you have just like 3 to 5 good comps, that should be sufficient. But this one has 12, so you really know, I mean, pretty close what that thing's going to sell for. All right, so our subject property is 1,600 square feet, 3-bedroom, 3-bath. And if you notice, like these first several properties, these are all very similar, but like you've got some of them that sold, like here's, you know, these first two that sold for $154,900, but one sells in 2 days, the other sells in 55 days. You know, then you've got the one that sells in 55 days is just, I mean, about 100 square feet less, and bedroom or 1 bathroom less. The square footage is still all pretty much the same property. So I mean, with something that close, it's kind of hard to determine what really caused that to take another, you know, 50 days or so on the market. So again, that's why just looking at more of, you know, that top range and the average, or your average price per square foot, I think that's sufficient on something like this. Let's see another example. Some of these sold like, you know, 5 days. One took 2.5 months to sell. One was 6 days. Pretty much around the same price. Well, this one sold for less. Let's see, like here's one with 1,800 square feet and it sold for 160, and here's one for 1,248 square feet and it sold for 170. That was the one I was talking about. So that's really, I think that's the smallest property we have here. It sold for the most. So what was the reason? I mean, I don't know. You know, it's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's similar to the other ones. It sold for more than this one that had 4 bedrooms. So you don't really know exactly what it is, but again, we're within the range, so that's really the most important part. That's what I wanted you guys to get, was just get good comps, be within that range. Don't price your property at the very top, price it close when you're doing your numbers. Then when you put it out on the market, readjust it again and try to price it a little bit higher if you can. All right. So, okay, so this is what I was mentioning with price per square foot. So I think this is a good way to kind of incorporate just overall what the property sold for and the size of the property, and just kind of get an overall value for that. And when you use this, you know, the CMA and the MLS or something similar, you can do that. Or you can manually do it. It just takes more time. So like our average price per square foot came out to 108, which was $161,000. So I priced our property a little bit above that. All right, so let's go back to the deal analyzer and we'll show you how to come up with the numbers. So really the most important thing here, after repair value, we've talked about how to do that. Then what we're going to do is where it says estimated repair cost, we're going back to our repair estimator and we're plugging in that number. Okay, so it was $57,000. That includes that $5,000 buffer that we had. And then purchase price, I put $60,000 as the purchase price based on what I wanted to make on this property. So let me just give you a real quick example of how to do that. Oh yeah, do I need to speed it up a bit?
Yeah,
Okay.
already 45 minutes in.
Okay. All right, so this is just a quick formula to be able to determine kind of a starting point on your rehab. So, and this is something you'll see if you look at a lot of investor forums and different things. It's the maximum allowable offer. And basically it's the after repair value, so 165 times 0.7 or 70% minus repairs. So that's not necessarily your actual number that you should offer, it's just close. So it's a good starting point. So that's just something that you can do to incorporate enough money. So the 30% that's left over in that incorporates your profit and also your reselling cost. So that's kind of usually what I use as a starting point to get to my number. So I'll just finish this out and you can do yours, and because I still got the other one to do. All right, so we've got our purchase price, our repair cost, and our after repair value. Those are your top three numbers. Then you want to look at your financing cost. So in this example, what I did was I just put financing cost at 100% of the total cost, just for simplicity. So I'm assuming that we've got a private lender at 12%, or you're basically paying them 1% a month, at $118,000 or $118,650. So that includes the purchase price, the rehab cost, and then the closing cost that you have over here on this other side. So in that case, you would be paying them a monthly payment of $1,186, okay, and that would be you paying your lender that interest every month until you sell the property. And I also put a holding time on this of 4 months. I think any rehab you do, you should at least do 4 months. Usually I actually run the numbers on 6 months, just in case something comes up, you can give yourself some extra time. But at least 4 months is good, or it should be your minimum for most rehabs. Okay, so going over here to your other costs that you want to incorporate into your analysis. Now these are costs you'll either get from your tax records or your title company or your real estate agent, and it is important to get these actual numbers to plug these in so you'll know what you're going to actually pay. And that formula I just showed you guys, it doesn't incorporate all your holding costs. Okay, so that's the other reason that you kind of use that as a quick snapshot of what you should offer. But then you still want to put it in some kind of a software or a deal analyzer so you can determine what your holding costs are and what your actual, your return is going to be. So you've got your annual property taxes, that's a little over $2,000 a month. You've got your insurance cost at $860. So you would get that from the tax records, and the insurance would be, whatever your insurance company is going to charge you for builder's risk policies. Then I'll just put some miscellaneous numbers here for the utilities. So just a couple $100 a month for water and electricity. So then if you see this, it just shows your monthly holding cost, then your total holding cost for that 4-month time period. And then I've got some expense here for attorney's fees or title company fees, whatever your closing fees are with your title company. An easy way to do this is usually it's costing me about 2% of the purchase price for whatever my closing costs are. Now most of the time, like when I make an offer, or especially if it's directly to the seller and not listed, I'll just pay all the closing costs. And it's usually that costs me about 2% of the purchase price of the property. And then this miscellaneous, one thing you can put here is, or the reason I put this is when you're buying property in Hamilton County, you pay transfer taxes. And a lot of places it's actually the seller that pays that, but in Hamilton County it's the buyer. So that incorporates that cost into that. It's not a huge cost, but you still want to at least account for it. So then your realtor fees, if you're paying your realtor 6%, you're going to pay $9,900 on the commission. Then typically you'll have some kind of closing fee whenever you sell the property. So these are the selling costs. The first part was the buying cost. These are the selling costs. Usually I throw in a home warranty. And then I added another $3,000 because usually in the price range where I rehab and where a lot of people rehab in Chattanooga, it's typically going to be areas that are good first-time home buyer neighborhoods, and usually you're doing some kind of seller concession, So you may not do as much now in this market, but I still usually account for some of it. So $2,000 or $3,000 would help account for that. So based on our analysis here, we'd make a profit of just close to $26,000. Our return on investment, which is basically the return on everything we have invested in that property, is about 18% or close to 19%, and that's within that 4-month time frame. So that's why, again, when I was looking at the purchase price, I went back to look at, okay, what is my net profit gonna, what is it going to be? I want to make, 20 to 25,000. How can I adjust that purchase price to where it's going to fit, what I need to make and what I want my return to be? Now you could still, you could offer more if you're good with making a net profit of 18 to 20. You could offer more on the purchase price. You could maybe not do as much on the rehab if you needed to cut cost. There's different ways of doing it, but this is this is the way that you want to go through and systematically look at how to make offers on your properties and looking at your after repair value, your repair cost, and then your return on investment. So so that's it for the rehab part. I've got an example of doing a rental property, but if you want to jump into yours, we can do that because we're going a little bit over here, a little bit longer than what I expected. So I'm just going to take this out.
Okay, so I have several different examples, and these are actually live examples of buyers that I've worked with. And typically, Eddie, where is this? Can you help me with?
Yeah, it should be right. Take it a minute.
Typically,
Yeah, there you go.
I use this tool. This is a great system. It's called iAnalyzer. It's about $250 per year. It's not bad. It can save you a lot of money. But I use this particularly with buyers and also when I'm analyzing sellers and where they want to be. But for the buyer side, I will actually present this with an offer to the listing agent so they understand why we came up with the numbers that we came up with. This is actually a multifamily, and this works really well with multifamily, general commercial, as well as strip malls, self-storage. It's a really good tool for all of those. And it takes it into the aspect of the income side, the expense side, and then cost of financing, and then acquisition fees, because there's a lot of different moving parts to a transaction like this. So the first thing you're doing is you're gathering all of the information about the property. And so, the old rule, junk in, junk out, okay, right? So if you don't have good numbers, you're not going to have good numbers when you're done with the deal. So really good numbers is very important. And what I find very challenging is some sellers who have had a property for a long time don't have very good numbers, right? They're pulling out their shoe boxes and you're going through shoebox for receipts and things like that. And then you have clients that have great spreadsheets. They can show you a P&L for 6 months, 5 months, 4 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Those are great clients because you can really understand what's going on with the property. But there's a lot of shoebox people out there, unfortunately. And sometimes they have shoeboxes that kind of get intermingled. They might have 2 or 3 properties, and that's what happened on a strip mall that I was recently evaluating for a client. They had expenses, once we started to really dig through them, they had expenses from another property mixed in with this property, and it was actually making the numbers look worse. But they were doing it because they were focused on what they were presenting for tax purposes, okay? Well, tax purposes don't really work well when you're trying to make the most money on a real estate transaction. So because what they were showing wasn't helping us validate what they were asking for in terms of the price of the property. Why I love this tool so much is it really gives you a simple way to do a cap rate, and there's lots of simple ways to do a cap rate. Most people can just do it in their head. But I like how it shows you how to do a price evaluation on a property. So this is a multifamily property, and you can look at and put in the income and expenses. I typically get monthly expenses, and sometimes I just have annual, but usually you have monthly. So you plug it in here, and there are certain factors that you always want to have in there. You always want to have in a vacancy rate, even when the property is 100% occupied. And when it's not 100% occupied, I add on top of that an extra cushion. So the standard right now is using about a 2% vacancy rate and bad debt about 1%. Those are just little extra cushions to have in there when you're analyzing numbers. And so that kind of is a simple way to do the income side. And then you can do the expenses. There's lots of different ways to do the expenses. I try to look at the overall expenses of the property and put in that as one number. And then I also look at fixed expenses if there's a lot of fixed expenses. The biggest problem with really coming up with good numbers is having good numbers to work with. And a lot of people do their analysis differently. For example, one of the big things is you can ask just for a separate 8% for property management or 6% or 10%. Other people have it in as payroll because they actually have staff on staff. So there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. Okay, how am I going to approach this? And so that's what I do with each individual client. I ask them, do you want to just plug in, a percentage for property management? What are you getting for property management? The larger you have a portfolio, typically you can get your property management down to 6%. If you have a smaller portfolio, you're going to be paying 10%. And those are true costs. You can't get away from that unless you manage it yourself. But there's still an expense to your labor, so you have to consider that. You cannot put in here that property management is free when you're analyzing something. You just can't. The other big factor is that I've seen a lot is taxes. Taxes are kind of all over the board. And one of the big things that a lot of people don't do when they're looking at commercial properties is stormwater, okay? Stormwater has changed analysis on some commercial extensively because there is a stormwater fee now for a lot of commercial property, like a self-storage facility. And it can be, it's an expense, but you can't overlook stormwater. You have to include that if there's a stormwater fee on a commercial property. And like self-storage has it, strip malls have it. They're all getting stormwater fees now. You have to include property management. It's not free, even if you're doing it yourself. You're worth something. Those are the areas where I see people undervalue what's going on. The other area is when a lot of interest rates are quickly changing. It can be 4.5%, and then 6 weeks later when you close, it could already be up to 5.5%. Well, you've locked it in, but just saying that, there are some floating numbers that are going on out there that are really important to understand. And taxes are very, very important to really get taxes correctly. I've seen a lot of clients undervalue the taxes, and then their first year they're going, God, I just got killed on taxes. Why? Why?
Because they didn't check the taxes themselves and make sure they were correct.
Correct, but also maybe the taxes were at a different price before, okay? Because taxes are not necessarily based on assessment value. If all of a sudden there's a jump in pricing and it was assessed before at $800,000 and now it's back on the market at 1.1, there's going to be new taxes. You think that they're going to go ahead and just assess you on the 800,000 value versus the 1.1 value? So you really, really, really need to understand taxes and how that can impact what's going on with a piece of property. That's an area that gets totally, under analyzed. So what you can do then is you can go down, you put in all your numbers, and you can go down to this create report. Well, I can look at any way I want to. I can just look at price evaluation if I want to. I can look at the financial analysis. I can look at a graphic analysis. Typically, the two that I like to look at are the sales price evaluation, the profitability analysis, and the financial analysis. Those are the things that I really like to understand. Then it comes up in a report. And so with this property here, you can see that the potential income annually is around $81,000. The effective gross income is around $79,000. The total expenses are at $31,000. And the cash flow equity appreciation is around $48,000 on this property. Okay? Now, this is where it really helps me show an agent if their pricing is off. This shows a sales price evaluation, and this is based on right now, I have this at a 6% interest rate. If we change this to 5%, it will change, and I can do that, and you can see. But right now I'm running interest rates at 6% because that's where they're going to be for commercial property here real soon. They just are. Interest rates are going up. Some of my clients are getting interest rate numbers right now at 6% when they're asking for information, trying to get, quotes on properties. So that changes if we change this to 5%, okay, we'll do that. So right now the sales price evaluation is at $578,000. They have it listed for $800,000. So that's a pretty big difference in terms of performance and perceived value. If we went in and we just changed the interest rate, and we make this 5% versus 6%, and we run the report again, and you can see what changed really in the analysis. So now the price went up to $618,000. Okay, so 1% changed it by $30,000 to $35,000 in terms of pricing. So that's a multifamily. They're all run basically the same. The biggest thing to understand is when you're looking at like a strip mall. I'll go over here. Because I have an actual strip mall on here that we recently were working on. And the taxes were really what was crucial there. And we could not get the seller to understand that with where they wanted the price to be, that the numbers did not work based on the cash flow analysis, okay? Our sales price evaluation came in at 1.1, and they were actually at 1.5. And they said, well, a 2%, you can't get 2% from a bank, so what's wrong with that? Well, I think there are some banks where you can get 2 to 5% if you're really, so sellers are really funny at times, and they don't understand that the numbers don't lie. But I've had great success just using this simple tool that helps me understand price evaluation, acquisition fees, expenses and income. But the big areas that you really have to watch are, taxes, and you have to include property management. So if you don't have property management in as an expense, in an appropriate number, then you can think it's the best deal ever, and all of a sudden a year later you're going, I'm not making any money. Why not? How many of you have done that? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so, the numbers are crucial. And, right now with where we're at with interest rates, you really, really have to be conservative when you're looking at deals right now to make sure if you're going to borrow a lot of cash that you're really seriously looking at that interest rate correctly, because it can be a game changer in terms of cash flow. Any questions on the commercial side? Did that kind of help you? And this is a great tool. I love this tool. It's very reasonable for what it can do, and I use it all the time. Uh-huh.
What are some typical cap rates you're seeing right now?
Well, that's a very good question. Depends on the market. If you're in Nashville, it's 2%.
Tracy, can you repeat the question? Yeah.
What's a typical cap rate right now? And I said it depends on where you're at. If you're in Nashville, it's down to 2% right now. That's why there's a lot of Nashville investors looking at Chattanooga. If it's a property, does everybody understand like a Class A property, a Class B property, and a Class C property in terms of commercial? Generally, okay, a Class A is like all of your new construction, a lot of anything that's been built in the last 4 to 5 years it's in a strong area, like downtown is a strong area. Areas like off of Gun Barrel are strong areas. So we have a lot of multifamily Class A property that have been done downtown in the last 4 to 5 years and are still being done, and off of Gun Barrel Road. A lot of those are your Class A multifamily properties. Downtown you have a lot of Class C multifamily properties. They're built in the 1960s, 1970s. They've had upgrades. They're in an okay area. They're in a blue collar area. Maybe the rents are between $600 and $800. They're not $900. They're not $1,000 to $2,000 a month. Okay. But there's a lot of strong Class C property that have had a lot of upgrades and that are really good cash flow properties. Those are going to probably give you around a 9 to 10 cap right now. They're pushing down a little bit more towards 8. If you've just rehabbed the property, I have a client that took a C property and is making it a B property. And for the bank purposes, the banks are allowing him to have a 7 cap. Okay? So if you're rehabbing a C property into a strong B property, you can be at a 7 cap in this market. A property, you can be at a 5 to 6 cap in this market right now. But that's about as low as you can go. Did that help? Did that kind of answer that question? Okay. Any other questions?
Not necessarily related to that, but just in general. For Hamilton County, if you buy a commercial property, is the property automatically assessed for taxes?
Yes. The question was, in Hamilton County, If you buy a piece of commercial property, are they going to reassess it? Yes. Because they're going to look at what the new purchase price is. However, you can still argue it, you know. And typically, if you have good justification, I have a lot of clients that have done that, they've been able to appeal it and gotten back to where the taxes were prior to them purchasing it. So if you sit on your duff and don't do anything, all of a sudden your tax bill is going to go up. But, you know, if you can, there is room for assisting with, you know, not getting your taxes to increase.
So one of your first or second phone calls with a commercial deals to talk company to see if I buy this on my tax bill here.
Correct, right. The big thing also is don't forget about the stormwater. We have a lot of stormwater issues in Chattanooga right now, and they've added a lot of costs to commercial property, standard commercial property. So you really got to look at that. Right.
Is that something the top company can help you out with as well? You can call city government to see what these.
City government. Yeah, we work with the planning department.
Even small multifamily has a water quality fee
Yep.
that gets added. It's like $300.
Yeah. It's not as bad as the big, you know, the big parcels, because they're basing it on acreage of land too. You know, they're looking at how much land you have as part of the stormwater. So, any other questions around the commercial? I find it's a very reasonable tool to buy, to use. I love it. It's very efficient and can give you a lot of good information. Any other questions? Uh-huh.
I won't pipe in because from the lender standpoint, if you're looking at cap rates, anything less than an 8 cap does not make sense to leverage. So it's going to be all cash play if it's less than 8.
Yep. Well, the banks are looking at 7s.
On valuations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Right. Okay. Yeah.
Valuations will do based off whatever market rate is.
Right.
For your value. But
Right.
for your money, for your rate of return,
Correct.
unless you're putting 50% down, it makes no sense to
A bank.
getting bank lending if your cap rate's less than 8.
Right. I would agree with you. Yeah.
Also, amortization schedule.
Well, and that's another good point. You know, most of the banks right now, I'm not seeing anything over 5 years. Now and then I'm seeing a few at 15. But are you seeing any? I mean, I'm just not seeing hardly anything over 5 years right now.
And then to Billy's point, you know, if you do get a finance purchase for, you know, 7% cap rate, then what's going to happen when you have to refinance that loan in another 5 to 10 years and the interest rate has gone up? I mean, your return is going to be next to nothing for some of that stuff, you know. That puts even more weight on really trying to buy it right, I think.
Like my grandfather always said, there's only one time you make your money. It's when you buy. All right, Eddie, you want to go?
You know, if you guys want to just do some questions real quick, we can do that. I think we're probably good on the analysis part, unless you guys want to go through more of this. I thought we could do more questions if that's good.
Any questions for Eddie?
Can somebody hit the lights if you don't mind?
Eddie, what's the name of your software?
Oh yeah, I was going to pull that up. It's called RealFlow, and what I'm going to do is, if you guys want more information on that, if you just email me here at eddie@rocksolidinvesting.com, I can just send you a link for that with some special pricing and more information about it. And it's really cool because it's like a back-end office for your real estate business. So it does a lot more than just what I did today. So you can do marketing, direct mail, you can do websites, you can do, you know, it's your CRM. It does autoresponders for your leads. So it does a lot more stuff than just the deal analysis. So just email me if you want more information on that. All right, so we'll just do some questions if you want to.
I think they got my.
Okay, you're good?